Okay, perfect, perfect. Okay, first of all, can everyone hear me? Yeah. Okay. Let me just get the screen ready. Perfect. Okay, so again, hello and welcome everyone. I'm very pleased that you could all join us today for our webinar with Lea, with Women for Peace Finland. I'd first like to begin with a land acknowledgement. I know many of you are joining us from far and wide, but Science for Peace is based in the city of Toronto, Ontario, Canada, and we'd like to acknowledge the land we're meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississauga of the Credits, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nation and Inuit and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by the Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. So my name is Allison. I'm the national coordinator here at Science for Peace. I studied sociology and peace studies at McMaster. I'm super happy and excited I get to work with amazing peace academics and researchers here at Science for Peace. Science for Peace for over 40 years has been a leader in conducting research and popular education to address vital issues affecting human security, such as nuclear weapons, climate change, and militarism. Since its launch, Science for Peace has expanded across Canada to students, members of the general public, and specialists in the humanities and social sciences, as well as industry. Through working groups, articles, research papers, teaching and petitions, workshops, student mentorships, and expert witnesses guiding the House of Commons in Canada, the organization's peace education activities serve a crucial function at the University of Toronto and the larger public. We currently have 4 working groups on the go, covering topics such as climate change and militarism, nuclear weapons, nonviolent resistance, and NATO to neutrality. To neutrality is one of our new working groups. A little bit of housekeeping before we start. We're looking about at a 1-hour webinar. Again, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat, share any comments or sources in the chat. Please make sure you have your mic off during the question period or until the question period. Just when people are speaking, we don't want any kind of background noises. And if you'd rather type your questions rather than speak them in during the question period, please just enter them in the chat and we can help read them out. So first, I'd like to now pass it off to Tamara. She's a Science for Peace researcher and head of our NATO to Neutrality working group. Tamara, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone from Waterloo, Ontario, Canada. It's really nice to be with you all. So I'm Tamara Lorincz. I'm the new, very part-time researcher for Science for Peace's new NATO to Neutrality working group. This is going to be a space where we can do critical research on NATO, have important critical conversations about NATO with the ultimate aim to get Canada to withdraw from this alliance and for NATO to be abolished. I am also doing my PhD at the Balsillie School of International Affairs at Wilfrid Laurier University. I'm active with the Canadian Voice of Women for Peace and the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom that also have a position for Canada to leave NATO. We believe it's a dangerous nuclear armed alliance that's led by the United States, and we should withdraw. Just before we have Lea speak, and I am so pleased that Lea could be with us from Finland to talk, I'm going to show some slides, and we're going to have a look at some maps, because it's really important to understand the geography of this, of Finland and Sweden joining the alliance. So I'm going to share my screen now with you all. So let's look carefully, friends, just for a few moments at these slides. So this is a map of Europe. You can see Norway, Sweden, and Finland. The red line there on the right-hand side is the border with Russia. And then you can see the Baltic Sea, the Gulf of Bothnia. There's the Gulf of Finland. And then this is another slide, shows you in the light purple, the NATO members now that are bordering Russia, and Sweden and Finland, which share land and maritime borders with Russia, are, in the process of joining the alliance. So we can see how Russia is being very much encircled, contained here. Look also at Ukraine on the Black Sea here. If Ukraine, a de facto member of NATO, how this is really pinning Russia in a maritime and a territorial way here. Now let's look a little bit more closely at the Baltic Sea. So we have Sweden. You can see the Gulf of Bothnia, Finland, borders Russia. There's the Gulf of Finland, and you can see these countries: Estonia, Latvia. Latvia is where Canada is leading one of the 4 NATO battle groups. We have a permanent base effectively in the country, a very active embassy. We've got Lithuania, the south. Then we've got Kaliningrad. This is Russian territory, and Poland, of course, which is a member of NATO with Germany. And you can see, this region, the Baltic Sea, is really very important. This is where this is important for Russia. Oops, let's just get back here. Just before the NATO summit in Madrid, the NATO summit was the 28th to the 30th. Just before that, from June about 5th to June 17th, 14 NATO members had a big naval exercise in the Baltic. So they do amphibious assault training, bombing. They're military. NATO is militarizing the Baltic Sea. They've been conducting these Baltic operations, these naval exercises, for the past about 35 years. And Canada has been involved in these exercises. We weren't involved this year, but we have been in the past. So you can see how NATO is very much militarizing the Baltic Sea. Finland and Sweden have been participating in this big. We're participating in this big NATO exercise. Now let's look at the map with the Russian pipelines, because this is really important. The oil and gas has significant impacts on the geopolitics and with this expansion of NATO. So let's look here. You can see Nord Stream 1, Nord Stream 2 that goes from Russia through the Baltic Sea to Germany. You see that at the top left-hand side there. And then you can see the big YAML pipeline from the north of Russia that goes through the Baltic countries into Germany. It passes through Belarus there. And then you can see that there's a number of pipelines, including the very important 1967 Brotherhood pipeline that crosses through Ukraine into Europe. Now, Russia supplies a tremendous amount of oil and gas to Europe. So these pipelines are really important to bear in mind. And then let's look closely again at Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2. This is the pipeline, that the United States was very, very opposed to, sabotaging, trying to prevent it from coming online into Germany. And you can see how it crosses through the Baltic Sea, Finland and Sweden, right there. And so in the Baltic Sea, now we've got NATO countries all around it, and very much containing and constraining Russia. The other thing to bring to your attention is that in February of this year, Finland, very disappointingly, decided to buy the F-35, the Lockheed Martin F-35 stealth fighters. So a $9 billion deal to buy 64 fighter jets. Well, a month later, Canada announced that we are going to buy 88 fighter jets, the same ones, the F-35, for $19 billion. I mean, this is really the ticket that countries have to pay to be part of this US-led military alliance. And then at the beginning of June, there was a debate in the House of Commons for Canada to approve the accession of NATO, of Finland and Sweden to join the alliance, and it was a unanimous decision. And Canada put out on social media an announcement that Canada has approved, has ratified Finland and joining NATO. And there you can see, this was at the NATO summit in Madrid, Trudeau shaking the hands of President Niinisto. And then you can see this tweet from the Finnish embassy in Canada, in Ottawa, thanking Canada for ratifying Finland's Ascension. And you should know that Canada was the first country to approve their membership. But I also want to encourage you, if you have time, to look at the Hansard debate and see what all of the political parties and the MPs said in the debate about this decision to approve Sweden and Finland joining the alliance. And I was very disappointed to read what the New Democratic MP, the minister, the NDP critic for Foreign Affairs, Heather McPherson, said, and what Elizabeth May, the member of parliament for the Green Party, said. Both of them erroneously argued that it was because of Russian threats that Finland and Sweden were joining the alliance. This is patently false. It's totally incorrect. There was no evidence at all of Russia having any threats against these two countries. In fact, since the end of the Cold War, there has been friendly relations between Russia and these two neutral countries. So it's extremely disappointing that the NDP and the Green Party gave a green light to this Ascension. It was a unanimous decision in Canada. And then finally, I also want to express my disappointment, because many of us in the women's peace movement in Canada, we had some hopes with Sarah Marin, the Prime Minister of Finland, leading this coalition of women in the country, and we had high hopes. But what we saw instead is greater support of this women's coalition for militarism, increasing military spending, buying fighter jets, and now joining NATO. So we are so pleased to hear directly now from Lea. I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now, and now I'm going to turn the floor over to Lea, but I will just quickly introduce her. She is a retired theater producer. She has been involved in the peace movement in Finland for over 40 years. She's an active member of the Women for Peace Finland, and she's also active in many other non-governmental organizations in the country: social justice, peace, women's rights. She's a mother and a grandmother with 3 grandchildren, and she is working very hard to have a world of peace for future generations. And so she's going to talk to us about Finland joining NATO, and also her experience being at the protest at the NATO summit in Madrid. Lea, we're so happy that you could be with us, and we're looking forward to hearing from you.
Okay, thank you, Tamara. Thank you very much for letting me be with you, and thanks also for the presentation about the situation where Finland is standing for. And I would like to start a little bit about the how the process in Finland went for the application NATO membership, and it started actually up with the war in Ukraine, which is actually devastating, and we have to get rid of that war. But what made Finland doing this mission was also the NATO and US who are increasing the full spectrum dominance in the world. And of course, then Russia, they wanted Russia to get on the knees, but it's obvious that Russia had to react on that. And I'm talking a little bit about the first expansion of NATO. When it was founded, it was 12 countries in 49, and now there is 30 countries. And despite from the prominent Western promises after the fall of the Berlin Wall about NATO not going 1 inch to the east, it's all the expansion itself. And this, of course, is a very big mistake after the Warsaw Pact ended. And one more recent, most important puzzle piece was that the makeup in Ukraine 2014 engineered by US and by NATO helped to this situation. And now we have the war in setting two crucial missing puzzles pieces together. It's the NATO northern region. As you saw in the map, there is Norway and Denmark who are the members of the NATO. So in Finland and Sweden, it was the Ukraine war that initiated to this. And also, as you mentioned, that Finland was buying the F-35 fighter jets. We in the women's movement were opposing that also, and many other peace organizations. And we knew that that was a starting point for going into NATO. And that was really a kind of a satanic plan, which was made only by overnight. And also, as you showed that Finland, we have a government that there's 19 ministers, and 2/3 of them are women. And our prime minister is a young woman. And we of course had a kind of hope that the politics, what they do, could be more kind of feminist perspective or so. But we are very, very upset about all these decisions they have now done. In 2021, only 21% of the Finnish people supported NATO membership. And then in March 2022, this year, the supporters amount was up to 62%. And then the NATO process started immediately after the Ukraine intervention. A masterpiece of totalitarian consensus dictator, we would say, and the politicians and the media was suddenly really for the membership. Our president and all our political parties and the media, both the TV, radio, press was totally for. And there was no democratic debate about, we didn't get any negative writings in the peace people and cultural people who wrote to the media that they never published their writings. And there were no articles about the alternatives or prominent person groups didn't their standing for it. And there was nothing about increasing tensions or increasing risks for a nuclear war. And despite of the Green Party, our foreign minister, Pekka Haavisto, telling before when Finland was elected into the member of the United Nations Human Rights Council in October last year. So he said in a press release that he and Finland would work for peace and understanding and integrating the civil society and NGOs in decision making. And that is really nothing that happened at all. And all the promises for a NATO referendum that our president minister was saying or telling before. So he forgot that completely after beginning of or in March. So Women for Peace, we have sent out lists of warnings by lots of prominent persons from Western world to some 70 chief editors and to our ministers and our member of parliament, that there has been no reactions. There has been no articles, critical articles, and total silence. And since there was no democratic debate, no free media, the Finnish people turned a couple of months or even weeks into totally blind and deaf NATO supporters. And it's really, really shameful that this happened in Finland as well as in Sweden, to rule who are ruled by the social democratic parties, as I said earlier, by women and democratic prime minister. And it was really parliament when they were discussing it. So there was 99% of the parliamentarians were for this. And the recent news from Russia, Russia's defense minister Sergei announced that new military bases will be established in the western part of the country and near the Finnish border. And as you saw in the map, the border, the Finland has the longest NATO border to Russia now. And they are planning for 12 new military units in divisions will be established in the western part in the end of this year. And how this really happened, that Finland has had as a country a rather functioning relationship with Russia for decades. The trade business benefited both parts, and there has been a kind of understanding, and also a lot of cooperation with the cultural people, music, dance, film industry, and all that is now gone. And in the late spring in 2021, the Finnish President Sauli Niinistö, who is now very proudly bringing Finland into NATO, announced his intention to arrange an OCE Helsinki Summit on the 15th anniversary, and that would be in 2021. That and for that announcement, he got support from Moscow, Washington, and Berlin. But the situation now is, of course, so that Russia would never attend such a summit in Helsinki when Finland has sent its application to NATO. And a little bit about how Niinistö also changed his mind is that in a Munich security conference in 2019, he announced that US would withdraw them from when US would withdraw from the treaty. He speculated on the possibility of extinction of the treaty in regards to Europe and continued to prohibit the placement of weapons and banned treaty. And he even mentioned an area reaching from Ural Mountains to the Atlantic Ocean. And all this was obviously too much for USA and NATO for full spectrum aspiration. So these two missing NATO pieces in the north had to be put into place. And now we have seen that it happened. Also, this is a little bit about the background. There are in some small groups popping up now against the NATO, but now it's too late. But it's good to see that there are opposition against NATO in I'm not very sure if it's in all NATO countries, but in many, and I'm glad to hear that you in Canada also have groups and people who oppose it. And as I was in Madrid with my colleague and good friend Ulla Klötzer, so there was this two different before the big rally on the 26th of June. And there were several seminars, working groups with hundreds of taking part in them, and people from all over the world. And you might have heard about well, of course, Kodepink was there from USA, and then Veterans for Peace, Colonel Anne Wright, who is very well known in the peace movements and peace organizations. And Peace Summit that was organized by peace organizations, environmental organizations, women's groups, and also of the labor unions, had more than 13 different groups working in. And I'll just read some of the topics, which were like crisis and militarism, the war in Ukraine, NATO and global consensus, the new alliance of NATO with Ukraine as background, alternatives for demilitarized collective security, social movements, how imperialist military policy affects US in a daily basis, the new international order, what kind of security architecture for Europe, and the common security report, the anti-militarization stance to wars, NATO armies and military spending, women's unity in the struggle against imperialism, women's unity in conflicts and peace processes, stop killer robots, the two-headed monster and patriarchy, and a perspective on strategies and international peace movement. And as you see, there was really a big spectrum of issues. In Madrid, the summit also ended up with the final declaration that stated that it's our obligation as members of the human species in order to build and defend peace from the north to the south, from east to the west, to demand our governments to give up militarism as a way of dealing with conflicts. And there was also a meeting with the No to NATO, No to War, and EPB, the International Bureau, who also gave us international statement. And in this one, there was also a discussion about how to go on forward in the future, and the No to NATO as an international peace movement calls on social movements such as trade unions, environmental movements, women's, youth, anti-racism organizations to resist the militarization of our societies that can only come at the expense of social welfare, services, and non-environmental and human rights. And together we can work for a different security order basis in dialogue, cooperation, disarmament, common and human security. This is not only the desirable but necessary if we want to serve the planet from threats and challenges posed by nuclear weapons, climate change, and poverty. And then on these seminars were on the 24th and 25th of June, and on the 20th, there was this big rally in Madrid, about nearly 30,000 people marching, dancing, singing, having speeches. It was really great, and kind of events and meetings with people gives me the strength to work together, and also shows that when we come together, we are stronger. The situation in Finland is the Women for Peace in Finland is a very, very small movement. We are not an organization, but we are a movement. And we are sad in a way. The big peace organizations like Peace Union and Peace Resisters have not been active in this struggle against the NATO. I don't know, we have been thinking about what is the reason, but we haven't found. I was just looking today on their website if they have something after that Finland signed the application in Madrid in 29th of June, but on their website I can't see any discussion or any writings about this. But there are two small groups that have been founded, and that is one website, not website, but one Facebook, consists of young people, and I'm very, very glad that they have founded this Facebook. They have had some critical writings. They have had some researchers who are very skeptical to what happened and how it happened in Finland. And then I heard about another smaller group, which is also consists of young people that are going to have a demonstration on the 6th of August, which is the Hiroshima Day. But this is something that happened now after Finland has sent in the application. So the situation is but it's not good, but there is some hope. So thank you.
It's bleak. The situation is very bleak.
Yes, Lea, thank you so much, and for your excellent informative presentation. I see that Agneta Norberg from Sweden is joining us from Stockholm. So I would like to turn the floor over to her for a couple of minutes to share her perspective from Sweden. And then we'll have about 10 minutes for questions and comments. And then what we're going to do is have Allison close the webinar and stop the recording. But we're going to keep the webinar open for if you would like to stay on and have an informal discussion, and we won't be recording at that time. So I'm going to turn it over now to Agneta to share the perspective from Sweden for just a couple of moments. Thanks.
The North is a platform for warfare against Russia. And it has been that way since many, many years. It didn't start now. What we see now is unfolding and planned very carefully. And they had to install the crisis in Ukraine because this was installed, among others, by RAND Corporation to let Russian lose its temper, and it started Otherwise, we are learned it started in February. It's wrong. It didn't start in February. It started on the 2014 when the fascists took power in Ukraine. And Victoria Nuland, State Department, and Geoffrey Pyatt, the ambassador of Ukraine, saw to that Arseniy Yatsenyuk, the fascist, was put in power in 2014, 22nd, I think. What happened after this? I'm so furious, so if I shout, it's because of that. Because they have cheated us to come into this terrible situation. Russia didn't lose its temper. It wanted to negotiate. Minsk won a negotiation in 2014. Minsk II, it was held in Minsk, Belarus capital. Minsk II in 2015. What did they decide? They decided as Donbass didn't want to be ruled by fascists. They said, no, we don't want to be ruled by, in fact, Nazis. But now they have drawn a little bit backwards. But this was the background. And they asked to Russian to come to their help in Donbass. But Azov battalion killed 14,000 people. 14,000 people. And eventually, through these 8 years, when the killing and the harassment and the burning of villages in Donetsk and Luhansk has been going on, eventually the Russians went in to liberate Donetsk, the Russian-speaking area. And this is behind, because the media never told about this. It's so shameful that we were cheated into going into NATO, because the media did never cover these atrocities in Ukraine through 8 long years. So I was brought up with the Russians are coming in from my childhood. So it has been a scapegoat for anything. Otherwise, they would never get any money for arming us as they do. They had to point out an enemy. And now we have an enemy. Look what they have done in Ukraine. We have to rapidly go into NATO. But this pamphlet I am showing you, I will end up now, is what I saw already in 2017. It's called The North, a platform for warfare against Russia. So we have been silently arming and training through the years and installing a lot of terrible installations like S-range in the north and also outside Stockholm, listening stations. So this is very carefully planned by Pentagon and Rand Corporation. Never forget what Rand Corporation is doing. And they explicitly say this war in Ukraine is the first step in weakening Russia, and then we take on Russia and divide it into 3 pieces. And the exercise for this was the Yugoslavian war, and see what Yugoslavia is today. So I will end up, this is a big, big plan. And my advice is now with Lea, the North has to go together to be a platform for peace, because now it is a platform for war. And the Nordic countries' military are very, very close cooperating. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Agneta. If you have a link for that document that you held up, the North, a platform for warfare against Russia, that would be great that we could, if we could share that, we could put that in the chat. And friends, if any of you have resources to share, feel free to put them in the chat. I'm going to put a petition for you to sign in the chat that says, stop the weapons, stop the war, stop NATO. And we just have about maybe less than 10 minutes for questions and answers. So if anybody has a question, if you just want to raise your hand and unmute yourself, you can ask Lea or Agneta a question or make a comment. Anyone? Or put something in the chat. But does anybody have any questions or comments? I see that Bruce Gagnon from the Global Network is on the call, and he's been to Crimea, Ukraine, and Russia a couple of times. He might have something to share if he would like to unmute himself and add to anything that Lea or Agneta said.
All right, can you hear me?
Yep.
I want to thank you for organizing this, and thank both Lea and Agneta for speaking. It's so important that we expand this discussion around the world as much as possible, because the US and NATO are essentially creating the trigger for nuclear war, which would be the end of it all. So, you know, I know a lot of people that work on nuclear weapons and are trying to stop the possibility of nuclear war, but many of them are buying the line coming out of US, NATO, the Russia demonization. And it's tragic. It's a tragic organizing mistake to buy that line, to believe it and to promote it. So thank you for doing this. It's really crucial. That's enough. It's good to hear others.
Thanks, Bruce. I had the pleasure of staying with Agneta in Stockholm 2.5 years ago and learned so much from her. And Agneta, I'm wondering if you might just, in just a minute or two, talk about your experience going to Russia for the first time. It was a very powerful testimony, and I'm wondering if you could just share with the audience, because some people might not know about that, the first time that you went and how moving it was and what you learned.
Thank you, Tamara. In 1968, my mother died. We were 7 children, and she had a small amount of money. So I got 1,000 Swedish kronor as a heritage from my mother. And I said, what can I do with this 1,000 kronor? Not just to waste it on spaghetti and meatballs and buy food. I mean, you eat it up and then it's finished. I said to myself, I have to do something important. By that time, I was a very prestigious member of the Liberal Party in Sweden, and they prospected for me a grand career. I could go anywhere. Yes, why? Wonderful. I went to Leningrad. What? I was brought up that the United States of America, they saved us all from Nazis, and they had their guns, you know, in the Calais, and they went into the harbor, and they saved us all from the Nazis. And then I came to Leningrad and learned quite another story, that the Nazis had destroyed 15 big cities, 2,000 smaller cities, 70,000 villages were burned to the ground, and 27 million dead. I was outrageous. I said, they have lied to me. What can I went home and went to the Liberal Party, and I said, I want to talk to you about something I have experienced. It's really terrible. They were not interested at all. Not at all. The leader, he just turned around and went, oh yeah, oh, what are you talking about now? It made me be the furious, knowledgeable, fighting person I am today. If they can lie to me about the war against Soviet Union, what else can they lie to me about? I stopped believing anything. I started fighting. So that's what I've been doing, marching to Paris, marching. Lea, we were in Leningrad, marching. We were marching to Washington in 1983, 82. We went to the streets, and that would be my message is, do as we did in 2015. What did I do in 2015? We had a big scissor, I don't know what it's called. We cut the fence in the area in the north where United States of America was training for war towards Russia. We went in and I went to the runway and said, we had a banner where we had written, it's enough. It's enough. And this was 2015. We were not in NATO, but the United States of America has kept the Swedish politicians in their lap. They are sitting there comfortably. Now, I must say, the left party has said, no, we don't want to go into NATO. But the Social Democrats are so wonderful. It's so wonderful with the United States of America. So they have been selling us out. But we have to understand the seriousness. We have to be angry. Stop. No, I wouldn't say stop conferencing, because it's also stupid to say that. But be visible. Show your anger. When we went into the airfield where US was training for their super Hornet or all these terrible bombing machines, we were only 8 women. We should have been 80,000. What could they do? What could they do? So my experience during the year is to follow Greenham Common women. What is Greenham Common? Most of them have forgotten that, but they closed United States base Greenham Common by not obey. When the police came and said, go away, go away. Oh no, they stood there for at least almost 20 years, 19 years. And now it's closed. It's sheep is there on the field. But we have to do it like that. So if we had been 80,000 or at least 800 surrounding the Kallax, it's called Kallax base in northern Sweden, we should have sent the message. That's my message today. Stop being polite. Stop being cautious for what the neighbor will say about you. Stop being a good mother.
Agneta, Agneta, you're absolutely right. We need to be more public. We need to be more disruptive in order to break through and get our messages out. But we need to wrap up this webinar. I would like to give Lea a minute to make any final closing, and then we'll turn it over to Allison and we'll stop the recording. And if you would like to stay on for a few moments and just have an open discussion, that would be wonderful. So let's give Lea a moment to share some final remarks, and then we'll pass it over to Allison. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Agneta, we know each other for years, and have had many of the same experiences. What I would like to say about the Sweden, what the Swedish Prime Minister, Anna Lindh, it's also a woman, has written to the NATO General Secretary Stoltenberg. She wrote that Sweden accepts NATO to security and defense, which includes the crucial role played by nuclear weapons. She also wrote in a letter about the Turkish president Erdogan demanded of Sweden in his closing remarks of the NATO summit for both Finland and Sweden in Madrid, that Turkey is not in this letter. What she wrote was not meant, but she said that Sweden agrees that terrorism in all its forms and manifestations is the most immediate, systemic and transnational threat to NATO and its peoples. And Sweden will do its utmost to combat terrorism with vigor and determination and solidarity. And this is something that has not been written or said for all the other NATO members. It's only Sweden and Finland who is has been posted for saying this and having it in their compendium. And that's something that never should have signed by the Finnish and Swedish prime ministers.
Thank you so much, Lea. And I've put those resources, the letter, in the chat. I also put the latest NATO strategic concept. I urge everybody to read it. It's very dangerous. It's the roadmap that all of the NATO allies have agreed to. And it's something that we need to denounce and reject. So now we're going to turn it over to Allison. Thank you so much, Lea. Thank you so much, Agneta. Thank you so much to everybody who's joined. And Allison, you can wrap up. Thanks.
Yes, so yes, of course, I'd definitely like to extend a thank you as well to Lea, Tamara, everyone who joined us today. A quick kind of closing remarks. We have our website that you can please check out, signsforpeace.org. You can find things like our donation link, latest articles, membership info. I can post it into the chat shortly. Please also check out our social media accounts, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. We post pretty regularly on those if you want to keep kind of in the know with us in that area. Also, quickly, let me just share I put it in the chat, those couple of notifications. Also, some upcoming events. We have our summer book club going on. We're meeting twice this summer, once in July and once in August. We're reading the book Standing on Guard for Whom? A People's History of the Canadian Military. We're meeting with the author, Yves Elgar, again, moderated by Tamara. We're going to be planning to read the book, all of our book club members reading it, and then joining us to discuss it on the 28th of July and the 18th of August. I can put in the Zoom link for you all to sign up for that. We'd love to have everyone join us for the book club then. Yeah, and it's in the chat now, I believe. Thank you, Tamara.
So thanks, everyone. If you want to stop the recording now, Allison, that would be great.